I've built a community to over 1 million people online over the last 6 years, but I didn't do it by dancing on TikTok, chasing trends, or copying what other people were doing. I found my own way. And in this video, I want to share the exact strategy I used to build my community and create a sustainable and thriving career out of teaching yoga. So, just a little backstory because it was not always like this. About 6 years ago, I was like many yoga teachers, struggling, teaching way more classes than I should have been, slowly losing my love for teaching because I was maxed out physically. I was losing my joy because I felt robotic. I was just on repeat every day, teaching class after class. And I didn't have an existing community, so I couldn't take anything away from those in person experiences. I couldn't build anything online or outside of those 20 classes per week. And this is why, regardless of what size of community you want to build, where you want to take your yoga teaching, having a community is essential. And just quick, if you are a yoga teacher and you are struggling with the business side of things, you feel like you can teach a great class, but you're struggling to get people to those classes or online offers, then I just created a business training to teach you how to do just that. The link is in the description down below. More on that later. So, when I was going on social media and I knew that having a community was essential, I started to look at what other people were doing. I did the same thing that many people did. In the beginning, I was kind of copying, chasing trends, trying to do what was relevant at the time. But I realized that that was not a long term strategy because you are always stuck looking at what other people are doing, not thinking for yourself, not creating for yourself. So I decided that was not the long term solution and I needed to go back to the drawing board. And I was spending a lot of time communicating with people, in comment sections, having conversations with clients at the end of classes. And I noticed that people have so many questions in every industry. People always are looking for answers to those questions. And I realized that that was a really great opportunity to start creating content that responded to those questions. So sometimes this is really broad, like, how do I build flexibility? Or sometimes it was a little bit more niche, like, my wrists are really aching in downward dog. What can I do? And I started creating the answers to those questions in video form. It started off with short form videos, just bite sized answers that people could go and apply straight away and start benefiting from. Or in some cases, I turned those ideas into full length classes. So it worked both ways for my content creation. And what I found is creating content that answered questions that people were looking for helped build my community way quicker than anything else did. Because I then became that go to person where people were frequently telling me in the comment section, I feel like you've just read my mind. I was just looking for this answer. And what I would often do is go through my comment section at the beginning of a week and then, write down all of the questions and just create content that answered those questions that week. And a lot of people would get back and say, no way, I just asked you this question in the comment section. And I would turn around to them and say, hey, I saw that question and here's your answer. I hope that this helps. I thought it would be easier if I answered in video form so I could show you, not just tell you. And people really, really appreciated that. And this is why this strategy is so powerful because it's centered around people. It's not centered around what's trending or, flashy edits or sound effects. It's just about creating things that serve people based on what they're already looking for. So if you have, feedback from students, if you're seeing questions that frequently come up, start creating answers to those questions because I promise you, people will really start to appreciate it. This also leads me into the second part of this strategy, which also centers around community. I spent a lot of time in the early days when I was building things on YouTube in my comment section, having conversations with people. I wanted to know their feedback. I wanted to know why, they thought this or why they felt this. Or, if they had a question, I would answer it and then come back with another question because I wanted to keep the conversation going. And this was helpful for two reasons. Reason number one, because it built community, it built a relationship with those people, which is what I really wanted. I really wanted to get to know them so that I could help them. But it also helped me with future video ideas because I found when I answered that question with an answer followed by another question, they would then come back with, another answer. And that might give me an idea for a potential short form or long form video. So, it was really beneficial. And I started adding all of these ideas to my very long list of videos. And in that way, I never struggle to come up with ideas. And this is why I've been able to stay so consistent on YouTube for so many years. This is why I've been able to stay so consistent with my content creation for other platforms too, because I've never run out of ideas because I always had a strategy to finding them. And again, this is why this outperforms chasing trends or copying other people every time, because you are thinking for yourself. You are thinking for your community and you are serving them with the content that you create. And that is the number one way to build a community, regardless of the size that you want to build. That is how you serve people through your teaching. And I think when we teach yoga online, it can often feel quite detached from teaching, or, it feels a little bit removed from the in person experience. And this is how you can actually add to people's experiences because in classes, they're moving quite quickly, right? And we don't always have chance to go into detail about things. And you might see things that come up and think, oh, if only I had, a few more minutes to just pause the class and go into detail about that thing. That's where social media is your opportunity to do that. You can treat every short form video like a really condensed mini workshop, just really going into the weeds, into the details about this one thing that people likely have thought about in class, but they just haven't had the time. They don't have the opportunity to put their hand up and say, actually, can you just explain that? Because the class is moving quickly. So this is why using social media in this way can be really beneficial for yoga teachers, where you can use it as your way to expand on the things that you're doing in class. And then when students ask you questions, you can go, oh, I've got a great tutorial to help you with this because it's easier if I show you rather than tell you. Go and check that one out. This also is helpful when you get really niche requests. Like I've had quite a lot of them over the years. And one in particular that comes to mind is a lady messaged me and she said, hi, I'm quite well endowed and I really struggle modifying my practice because I find there just aren't those modifications being mentioned in class and I don't know how to modify and accommodate my body. So I thought that must be something that so many women can relate to. And I made a video about it. I made a short form video and I thought, oh, I'm not really sure how this is going to go. It was one of those when I closed my eyes and hit publish and then just didn't look at it because I'm always, worried if people will take it the wrong way. But they didn't. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, thank you. No one has ever mentioned this, but it's something that I've struggled with forever. And that is why, it can be such a great strategy. But now, as a result of that, I actually use those modifications in my regular classes because I realized up until that point, I was trying to make my classes all levels and inclusive, but they weren't truly because I wasn't using, communication that made it accessible for all people. The way I was wording things wasn't actually excluding people who are more well endowed. So now I bring this up, particularly in twists. I'll say if you're feeling a little bit restricted here and you need more space, here is what you can do. When you're stepping through from downward dog, stepping straight down the middle might not always be an option. So step to the side. But this is why having this kind of strategy where you're creating that conversation with people and you're responding to those conversations not only makes you a better creator, helps you build community, it makes you a better teacher. But being a great teacher is only one part of the equation, and your YTT likely prepared you to teach a great class, but it didn't prepare you to actually get people to those classes. And this is the biggest disconnect, in my opinion, or the biggest gap in yoga teachers' knowledge, because they go through YTT fully prepared to teach, but not how to turn teaching into a full time career, into a business. And this is why I created a business training for yoga teachers to help connect the dots. I'm teaching you everything I've learned over the last 7 years, going from teaching 20 plus classes, feeling like I had no future, to having a thriving business where I'm creating things that I love. I'm working on my own time. I'm able to pick and choose what I do. And I really, really love what I do. And I feel like there's so much future there. So if you are currently struggling with the business side of teaching, then come and check out the training. The link with all the details is in the description down below. I hope to see you there.